I want to use our time wisely. For those who came in, I hope you got a book. We had didn't have enough. We weren't sure how many to have, so we had one per couple. But for those who go on the Israel trip, everybody gets a copy. So you'll get another copy on the Israel trip if you sign up. But this book has been around for a while. It's in multiple editions now. But Greg Hattenberg and I kept putting it together for groups that we were sending to Israel. Then we kept revising it and said, this ought to be a book. And so that's how it finally ended up in book form. But the first quarter of the book is how you get ready for an Israel trip. And it's really worth reading, just all the details there. The next big chunk of the book is Israel and all the sites in Israel. And we designed it so that somebody can go and the night before in the hotel room, you can read where you're going the next day. It gives you a thumbnail sketch because we found people would go to Israel. They'd be at a site going, this is unforgettable. This is unforgettable. Yeah. And by day 3, they said, where were we again? And when I was at seminary, they had students come to me and say, can you tell me what this picture is of? And so we found that by providing that, and then when they go to a site, they can make notes at that spot on the site. That way they have information that connects their pictures with what they saw. And the more you connect it all, the more you'll never be the same reading your Bible. And then the last part is when you say, this was fun, now where can I go at next? I can go to Egypt, I can go to Greece, I can go to Turkey. And we have put that in there, but that part doesn't get used nearly as much as the first half of the book. Now, what I want to do, though, is go through quickly some material because I want to allow enough time for questions at the end because the most important question is the one that you have. And so if you see something and it brings it to mind, just jot it down, and I'll give time at the end for the questions. But first, I have the basic material is November 9 to 20. And if you got one of those little forms, the actual spot to find the online brochure is www.morningstartours.com. And then you have to add that /GSC 1502. But if you have that, and if you got those little forms, did you have some over there, Kathy? We did, yeah. So you can grab one here, but take that and it'll give you all the information. Starting with these, so what are some basic tour details? By the way, there's Greg Hattenberg, the other co-writer for the book, a dear friend. But here are the basic tour details. I'm going to be looking this direction while I do this. The cost is $69.50 per person. That's double occupancy. Now, if you say, well, I'm going by myself, well, they'll try and pair you up with someone else for a roommate if you need one. The air transportation is transatlantic economy class from Phoenix to Tel Aviv. But there's no direct flight from Phoenix to Tel Aviv, so it's from Phoenix to somewhere to Tel Aviv. Right now, they have it set up via United Airlines and Lufthansa through Germany, but that could change. There are a bunch of airlines stopped flying, and now they're starting this month and next month, and so they'll keep checking, and they'll get us the best airline to get over. Usually, it's going to be United or it's going to be Delta. American is supposed to come back in September, but they're late to the game on this one, so it'll probably be United or Delta. But it's usually a gateway city, which is normally New York or Miami or Los Angeles. They route us one of those or the other. So it could change as it gets further into the season. The tour price does include the airfare and the hotels and breakfast and dinner every day. So it's 2 meals a day and all the entrance fees and all the tips and all the pre-trip materials. And I say that because you'll find a lot of trips and you'll say, well, they're a lot less expensive. Read carefully other trips because then when you get signed up, then they say, oh, now there are tips that will be expected to give. If you've ever done a cruise, you've seen that kind of a thing done. Well, that's done on Israel trips too. Oh, just hold on. Yeah. I put something in my hand and I'm dangerous. There we go. But this trip, we want to have everything in. There's only one thing that's not in there. Well, lunches and one thing. I'll get to that at the end. The payment schedule, they put a deposit down when you register. There's a second payment in the end of June, and then the balance is due the end of August, and then early November we fly. And here's it's limited to one bus. I've done multiple bus trips. I've done 15 bus trips. They are a lot of work, and most large bus tours are just convoys going through the land. We're doing one bus, which means it'll be 48. That's what we could stretch it to 50. There's 56 seats on a bus. We do not want every seat filled because at some point somebody might not feel so good. They want to lay down in the back seat. You want to have a few extra seats in case you need them. So 48, maybe 50. And here's the one place. The price does not include trip insurance, which is highly recommended. Now, Morningstar Tourist says they have a company they work with, but you don't have to use them. You can find your insurance company, check to see. But there's a bunch of different companies that do troop insurance. The reason that's important, Kathy and I did a trip once. At the end of the trip, we stayed a couple extra days and we're doing some exploring and some other possible sites for the future. And we ended up exploring Hadassah Hospital at the end of the day because Kathy slipped on some gravel and broke her ankle. And we got to see Hadassah Hospital and all the fun stuff. But they did cover the cost of the Hadassah Hospital, the emergency room. They covered the cost of having to upgrade her to business class because she had to be lying flat coming home. Now, it took a while to get the money, but they did come through with that. And it's those kind of things you go, insurance is a waste of money until you need it. And then it's the greatest investment you ever made. So what's the number one question everybody asks? Is it safe to travel? Am I going to be blown up when I get to Israel? Because that would sure put a damper on a trip. Well, we don't issue guns to people when they come. We don't have armed guards on buses. But it is fun every so often to see things. This is the Western Wall. We went up to the Western Wall. The group of guys were praying. Of course, they have their guns on their rifles on their shoulders. So you got to get a picture like that to send back home to the people. And it's amazing. It's kind of like being on a rifleman. Remember Lucas McCain? But when everybody there has rifles, right, you really feel safe. It was incredible. This is actually one of our early Grace Bible Church trips. And her husband was afraid that he wasn't going to be safe going. So, of course, they said, well, let's get a picture of you with all the soldiers around. And so they did. The soldiers all cooperated. Now, there are things that happen. In fact, if you're up on the news, about 2 weeks ago, there were several bombs placed on buses that went off. No one was hurt. No one was injured in the process, but this was a bus bombing. You go, wait, there's still things going on there. I mean, how can it be safe? Well, I hope to convince you of that, but let me show you this. That bus used to look like this. It's an Egged bus company. That's the Israeli version of Valley Metro. It's the public bus company that's what the public used to travel. That's the kind of buses that terrorists go after because their goal is not to get tourists. They want to get Israelis. Here's what our buses look like. There's no way to confuse a tourist bus with the Israeli public bus company. In fact, the people on the right that's our guide, Tali. She is a native Israeli, but she's an Israeli believer. And the fellow to her left, but our right, is Munir. Munir, I've ridden with him for over 30 years. Munir's our driver. He is an Israeli Arab Christian believer. And if you want to know the real solution for the Middle East, how you can get Jews and Arabs together, it comes through Christ. And they are the living example of it as we drive through the land. But it also means we have people with high experience who know everybody going on. They are in touch with everyone. In fact, there were days before we really got high tech in the U.S. I'd go to Israel to find out what our next phones would look like because Munir would have phones that were better than ours. He had the smartphones before most people here ever got them, and he had 2 smartphones at a time, keeping tabs with things. But they're always in touch with what's going on in the office, what's going on. They know what's happening. Now, you're going to say that's a terrible looking map, and it is. But I want you to follow a couple things. Most people are terrible in geography. So where are the problems in Israel? Well, we're going to look at the major areas of conflict. And I'm going to start down the lower left side. See the red circle that just came in? That's the Gaza Strip. So when you hear about all this fighting in Gaza, it's way down there. But the only time I've ever been down to the Gaza Strip was a year ago when we were there to film what was happening. I've never taken a tour group down to the Gaza Strip. I have a friend who does, but he's nuts. But we don't. But that's the Gaza Strip area. Now, way up in the north, at the very top, you're going to see another arrow there, the circle appearing. That's southern Lebanon. And that's where Hezbollah was. And they were a major problem until Israel pretty much took care of them with those pagers and everything else. They're not a problem anymore, but when you read about Hezbollah, they're up there. Now, I want to put like a hot dog shape, sausage shape in the middle. That's right. In fact, Tel Aviv is in the center of that. That is modern secular Israel. That's a spot we don't go because there's nothing biblically significant there. It's like going to New York City. If you want to see the Jews in New York City, you can go see them here in Tel Aviv because they'll come for the summer. It's secular. It's very liberal. It's just where you don't want to go. But that's also where the buses got blown up because they're trying to attack Israelis, and so they go down in that area. And then this final spot, it's in the kidney shape, the West Bank area. There, just up here. There's some Arab towns, and if you look carefully when you see news articles, you'll see Nablus, Jenin, Tulkarm, and some other villages associated with them. That's kind of the hotbed of Muslims in Islamic and Hamas in the West Bank area. Now, those are the four areas where pretty much everything you read about in the papers takes place. So let me put our tour on this map. Here comes our tour itinerary. It's going to be in purple. It's going to start where the airport is there. It goes kind of going up, around the Sea of Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee, all the way up to the north, down to the Dead Sea, and now it comes back to Jerusalem. And if you're looking carefully, what you notice is we don't go to any of those other areas. Only people who are nuts go to those other areas. We stay where the biblical sites are, and the biblical sites are all around that. So by focusing on the Bible and biblical sites, we're just skipping where all those other things are happening. And that's why you can go to Israel, and even if people say, aren't you going to be blown up? You know, my dad went, in the first couple of days, he was just sure he was going to be exploded, blown up, and if he wasn't, he was going to be poisoned because there'd be no food he could eat. It was a couple of days so he could actually relax. And then he finally figured out why. I'll give you another story on him later. Okay, here's the first-hand report. We were there a year ago. Kathy and I and my co-host and his wife filming, and we went to Magdala, which is on the Sea of Galilee, which is pretty close to Lebanon. And Father Eamon Kelly is there, the priest who runs this area. We've gotten to know him over the years. So we talked to him about how safe is it? And here's what he said. I'm going to put the microphone down here on my computer.
People don't understand that that's the way we are here between Mount Arbel and the Sea of Galilee and Magdala. Nobody could believe it. They just think everything should be exploding and fire and rockets and everything. And most of the country is actually very serene and peaceful.
And that was right during the height of the war. And he said it's just people don't understand it, but they had no problems at all. The big problem, in fact, the reason tourism went down is Americans were scared and planes stopped flying. It's tough to travel somewhere when you can't get there. So what are the flights like? That is not our airplane. But that's what a lot of people think it's going to be like. You're going to be packed in, 1,000 people standing like a herd of cattle in a 3-tier plane flying over. Now some of you are veteran flyers. You know, okay, I've been overseas. I know what it's like. Others, it might be your first time to do overseas flight. So here's what happens. From Phoenix, you usually go to a departure airport. New York, Newark, Miami. There's certain areas where they fly to Israel, but domestic flights today tend to be crowded. The planes they're packing them. The airlines are trying to make their money. And so what I do, let's see if I can get this to work right. Is it going to show up? That's right. There she is. Well, it's showing up on mine. You can't see it. Well, I'll put it over here. See, if you can see this lady right here, that is what I'll be like. When I get on the plane, my goal is to just put my eyes back and get rid of sleep. Because sleeping helps pass the time on the domestic flight. And then you get to the gateway city, and then you have a trip from there over the transatlantic to Israel. And I have a different picture. Now, it's more crowded than this. This is taken as people are coming on the flight. But I put it on to show you something. The transatlantic flights today tend to have in the seats your own television. So you can have movies, you can have television programs, they have other entertainment there. There are things to do on the flight. And so sometimes I'll look and see what movies are. If there's something I've not seen and like to, I can watch it there. I can sleep as well on that flight. I can bring a book along and read. You just plan to have things to do. But also, there's 2 aisles, and there's a place to get up and walk around. They have plenty of restrooms. They have a little snack area in the plane where you can go get something to drink or get a little snack. So you can feel like you're moving around and you're not stuck. But it is also a good time to sleep.
You need headphones.
For here, in fact, it depends on the airline. Some of them, on the transatlantic, they usually give you a set of headsets. They're not the greatest because they expect you to walk off with them, but they do have them. And some, if you have the regular plug, you can use your own headsets and plug into it. Okay, so how do I pack for the trip? This is not how you do that. In fact, this that you got on the right is not how you should do it. You really want to, a small suitcase, and what we usually say is this: less is more. In fact, I deliberately dress this way because when you see me in Israel, this is how I have my t-shirts. If you really want to see me dressed up, I'll have a golf shirt, jeans, and sneakers. We don't do anything dress up. There's no reason to bring it. It's not like a cruise where you have a captain's table you're going to sit at. We want people to be comfortable and just enjoy themselves. So it's you know. By the way, if somebody tries by day 3, we're all looking alike anyway. So,
Ready.
Another question. Okay, so how different is Israel going to be? You're going to come in and see purple elephants walking down the street. Well, if you went in 2 days, you might, because it's Purim. Purim is Israel's version of Halloween. You might see some really weird things happening in Purim as they dress up. But you're more likely to see something like this. I mean, where else can you see an ultra-Orthodox Jew riding a Segway while checking his smartphone inside the old city gate in Jerusalem? You just never know what you're going to spot. So there are some things that are just different, but they're not that much. I'll give you some other examples here. Some things won't be familiar, others will. So on the left, you're going, I'm not sure what that juice is. I might try it, but I'm not sure what it is. But I think everybody here knows how to read Hebrew on the right.
Yeah.
And you see that and I know exactly what that is. Coca-Cola in any language. Or here's one, restaurant you might want to stop at, and I'll bet you know what it is, even though it's written in Hebrew. They're around. Now, of course, going inside, you may see a couple soldiers with their guns getting their ice cream cones, but that's just the way it is. It's just enough different. What I love is you may want to stop at the Holy Bagel to get something to eat. You'll notice, by the way, I'm always fascinated with the signs, so I'm just taking all these crazy signs there. Or I like this one, the Hallelujah Shawarma and Grill Bar. But you certainly can find something to eat there. Virtually everyone does. Like, you feel really dumb because almost nobody doesn't speak English, and yet we don't know Hebrew or Arabic. Our bus driver, Munir, speaks. Well, native was Arabic, but he learned Hebrew growing up, and then he learned English. And then he picked up French and German, and that qualified him to be a bus driver. So you really feel kind of dumb, but they do put us to shame. Well, another major question, so where are we going to be staying? And you may have talked to someone who said, it was like a step up from a Bedouin tent. It was a Jewish kibbutz, man. It was just awful. What's it like in Israel? Unless they've been there in the last 10 years, they probably have a distorted view. But here's where we're staying. The first night, one night only, we fly in, we go to the Dan Caesarea Hotel. The water in the background is the Mediterranean. Between the hotel and that water is where the city of Caesarea is. We skip that hot dog shape where Tel Aviv was in the middle. We land at the airport, we drive north of Tel Aviv, and we stay at this hotel. It puts us about an hour ahead of all the other tour groups. So while they're trying to get ready and fight the traffic in Tel Aviv, we have 5 minutes from here to our first stop. And about the time they all start showing up, we're now moving on. My goal, by the way, have you ever heard about the unofficial guide to Disney World? It's a book, when we took our kids way back when, it basically says, here's how you get ahead of all the lines. Well, we have an unofficial guide to Israel, and the goal is to stay ahead of all the lines whenever possible. And staying at this hotel is it. Then you're jet lagged when you get there. So the goal is you want to stay awake till 9 at night. So you go up, walk the grounds, look around. If November might be a little cool, but if the pool's open, you can try the pool. But it's just a nice place to spend. In fact, you'll be going, we're only here one night. Yeah, because we got to get going the next day. But we head north from there, and we spend the next 3 nights up by the Sea of Galilee. And a new hotel. In fact, this hotel was not finished when we were there in March, a year ago. They finished it this summer. The David's Harp Hotel in Galilee. And to give you an idea where it is, there's the David's Harp Hotel, and there's the Sea of Galilee behind it. So we're right in that by the Sea of Galilee. But yeah, it's not in downtown Tiberias. It's not crowded. It's not noisy. It's going to be a nice, restful, relaxing place at the end of a touring day. Has a nice swimming pool as well. You're 600 feet below sea level there, so you're actually in a tropical climate. So even in November, it should be pretty nice. And again, the dining room area, it's just brand new and fully furnished. We'll get there before the Israelis ruin it. I kid you not. They send their kids places, and we've been in hotels where the kids just they're throwing pencils into the ceiling and the parents don't do anything. So after about 10 years, the hotel goes down, they have to renovate it. This is all renovated and there are no Israelis there right now. Then we go, after the Sea of Galilee 3 nights, we go down to the Dead Sea and we go to the Israel Nevo Hotel Dead Sea. Or if you want to call it that, just call it the Israel Dead Sea. There are 2 hotels down there by this chain. We're at the one that's a spa hotel. Again, it's hard to look to see, but on the upper left-hand side, the water that you can see there just in the distance, that's the Dead Sea. So we're right by the Dead Sea. And again, pretty much out by ourselves. Now, what we like about this hotel is that it's nice. It's a spa hotel. So you go out and float in the Dead Sea if you want. But if you don't want to do that, they have a Dead Sea pool where they bring the Dead Sea water in. And you have free access to the spa. So you can go down and float in their Dead Sea water, or the fresh water that they have. They have a workout room area. They do have spas, treatments and all that. Those are extra. But the entrance to the spa and all this kind of thing is free. We're there 2 nights. And then we head to Jerusalem for the final nights. And we go to the Dan Jerusalem Hotel. And it's a big hotel. It's a tourist hotel. And they have great staff that we've known for years there who really take good care of the people. This is the view from on their balcony kind of area looking down. And I'm sorry this isn't working. I wish this worked because it's blind. Yeah. If you can walk here, look at my computer, you can see what this is showing you. Otherwise, what you would see if you have better than 20/20 vision, I'm looking out and I'm seeing right here there's a little gold dot. That's the Dome of the Rock. We're just on the north side of Jerusalem looking down on the old city of Jerusalem. Something you might be able to see as well. This is on Mount Scopus, which is the northern end of the Mount of Olives. So the hill that you see out here in the distance, that's the Mount of Olives. So you're next to the Mount of Olives looking down on Jerusalem. And if you want to attach it to a biblical event, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, in Isaiah 10, he says that he brought his forces and he shook his fist at Jerusalem from Nob. This is where he was. He stayed at this hotel. It was there in Nob, shaking it in Jerusalem. Never got any further, though. But it's an incredible place to end at the time. Now, here's what the lobby looks like in that hotel. Again, you will not be roughing it in these hotels. You may want to tell that to other people, but you will enjoy your time in the hotels. Okay, so what do you wear? I mean, what's this? We don't have uniforms. But basically, there are 3 C's of what we say for wearing. The first one is casual. We really want people to be comfortable, to be casual in the trip. And so I just put some pictures, and you see there's sneakers there. There's a jacket. Bring a little bit of a jacket along with you, but some kind of a jacket, a hat, and golf shirts for men. T-shirts are great. You'll see me in this. In fact, I still have this green jacket that I'll be taking with me until it falls apart. This was one of my dress-up days. I actually had a collared shirt on, but I have my hat on, my sunglasses, and one little thing I put on here is the reason I take that jacket is in November, we can get cold or wet. I mean, it should be. It's much like here. The weather's pretty much like Phoenix. So you pack a coat, and we'll Scotch guard that coat before we go, in case it gets wet. But otherwise, it's great. Now, here's other things. Notice here's a little more formal than I would be, but the hat, the simple shirts, my T-shirts and jeans. That's what you're going to see a lot of there. Golf shirts, just basic comfort, casualness, and that leads to the second C, which is comfort. Now, there's a guy in blue there that just totally blew it for me on this picture because he's way too dressed up. That button-down shirt. You can wear those if you want, but you don't have to dress that way. At night, you might want to put on something else, but frankly, I will set a standard low enough that you'll always feel good. On the Sea of Galilee, and you'll see everybody going from some with shorts. We used to call my mom called them clam diggers, to jackets and jeans kind of things. But again, people just want to be comfortable. That's what you want. Here's Tali, our guide on Masada. But the reason I put this picture in is notice the hats. One of the more important decisions you make is what kind of hat do I want to take? And I'm one of those that wears a baseball hat. But a wide brimmed hat is a good idea. That's what you tell somebody if they came to Phoenix. Because if it's sunny there, it's going to be much like it is here. And if you're out in Phoenix in the sun a lot, you want something with a wide brim. Casual and comfortable and conservative is the third C. And the reason for this, like, look in the background, there's a lady in like a purple skirt, but her shoulders are uncovered in Jerusalem. That's a scandal. No. Conservative in Israel is very nice. They're legalistic, but it means if your shoulders are covered and your knees are covered, you are conservative. And especially we'll tell you. In fact, we'll have a thing we call modesty days. So okay, today we're going to the spot, and it's a modesty stop, which means you cover your knees, you cover your shoulders, which means you can also bring along a set of jogging pants. If you're wearing shorts that day, slip on the jogging pants, go in, and then become immodest when you leave. Take the jogging pants off, and you're fine the rest of the day. But here's another group of our group, and it was a little cooler in the winter. It's not a big problem because you have a jacket on, you have long pants on. You're modest. But the reason it's important, here you are in Jerusalem, and that's a typical Muslim woman in Jerusalem. And compared to them, even when you have your knees and shoulders covered, you feel a little bit immodest, but you're not. Here's some ultra-Orthodox men and women in Jerusalem. And the women are, long skirts, their hats or the wigs on, the men with their hats, and also you want to just not be obnoxious, I guess is what I say. And that's, we want to be conservative. Now here's, in comparison, this is not our group. But that is a guy that you want to say, like to slap him and say, you realize you're in Jerusalem, in the old city. Maybe you ought to dress a little more appropriately. Or these are American Jews, a student group. And they're at the holiest site in all of Islam, of all of Judaism. That's the Western Wall in the background. And there they are shouting in their T-shirts and cutoffs and in sleeveless shirts for some of them. They're just, you can always tell Americans usually just try not to get too close to them. And we don't want to be ugly Americans. And the worst one of all was this one. I wanted to go up and slap this guy myself. I took this picture. He's at the Western Wall, the holiest spot in Islam. And he shows up in shorts with a Jesus T-shirt. That would be the equivalent of somebody in the middle of our service coming in and then putting on a prayer rug and facing Mecca and starting to do their prayers in front of Pastor Bill as he's preaching. It was just so inappropriate. And we don't want to do that. We want to give a good testimony. So that's why we just say we want to be conservative in the broadest sense. That's usually not a problem with our group. I'd talk a lot more about that when I did student groups. Another question I know everybody asks, so how much walking is there? Probably more than we're used to. We say usually you can expect about a mile to a mile and a half of walking a day, but not in one giant spurt. The bus pulls up to a site, we get off, we walk a little bit to the site, we come back. We go to the next site, we walk to the site and come back. So it's in short spurts for most of it. And whenever possible, we try to walk downhill rather than uphill. This is on the Mount of Olives. And doing the Mount of Olives, if you're on the trip and you go down, I'll remind you at the time and just say, thank God we're walking downhill, because if I were walking this uphill, I'd be really tired. And you get a great appreciation for Jesus, because he did that up and down, going into Jerusalem and then reversed it to go back to Bethany at night. He was no wimp. But here's some other pictures. One of the longer walks, and I actually went and verified it again today. It's a quarter mile at Mount Arbel. And in the very way in the background is where we started. You see this group coming up. Now you notice they're Grace kind of people. They're our kind of people. And I'm up in front of them taking pictures of them. And we're not jogging up, but we're working our way up. And that's about, and again, it's just it's almost exactly a quarter mile from where the bus stops until where we end up on top of Mount Arbel. Now here's with a younger group. I'm not in the front of this group anymore. I'm behind them. They're on the way up to the top of Mount Arbel. But you can see how it kind of winds its way up to the top. And we just take our time and make it to the top. That's one of the longest walks. It's on the first day. And by the way, it sets the pace. You get an idea. Because what they say, it's not quite on Mount Arbel, and it helps. Now here's in Jerusalem, a little bit different. I put two pictures side by side. On the left picture, if you look, the stones are a little bit wet. There was some rain that day in Jerusalem, and you notice it's cobblestones. That's limestone. And so it can be just a little slippery, which means you don't want to wear some flat shoes that are nice and slippery. You want something that has a decent grip with it. I have my sneakers work really well in that kind of a thing, but that's how it is. On the right side is another part of the Via Dolorosa. It's a nice clear day, but you notice the steps. I love steps now that I have a new knee. It makes it really fun. Which, by the way, my wife reminded me, one of the nice things that you might want to consider if you're going on the trip is a walking stick. This is hers. That's why it's a little bit low for me. But a walking stick can really help in those kind of times. And one like this, you can just fold it down, carry it along, and if you need it that day, you just use it for that particular spot. But that's the kind of walking. So it is different than Phoenix. Phoenix, everything's flat. If you want to walk steps here, you almost have to go down to the mall and walk up the escalator. The down escalator to get your steps in. There, everything is either uphill or downhill. And it's just different than Phoenix. What can I expect to see and do? So let me compress an entire trip into just a few minutes here. You go the first day, 5 minutes, get on the bus, get off the bus, walk into a theater, and you're in a 2,000-year-old theater built by Herod the Great, where we could talk about the events in Caesarea by the sea. And you think of everybody who was there. Peter was there, Paul was there, Herod the Great was there, Herod Antipas was there, Paul gave a defense there. All these things happen, but we'll have a devotional time in that theater. We'll also see some other things there, including the aqueduct. When Herod built it, there was no water there. No problem. He brought the water 6 miles away, and the aqueduct is still there 2,000 years later. We leave there, we drive north, and we go to Mount Carmel, where Elijah had his contest with the prophets of Baal. So that's what that statue's showing. But while the statue's neat and the grounds are nice, we go into a monastery there, and we climb up on the roof of the monastery. There's a nice stairway that goes up. We get up on the roof of the monastery because we have an incredible view of the Jezreel Valley from there. So you can retell the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal and see all the pieces, all the details you've never paid attention to suddenly come alive. And as you look out over the Jezreel Valley, you get this idea of all the things that happen. In fact, you stand there and go, well, there's the Nazareth Ridge. That's where Jesus grew up. And there's Mount Tabor. That's where Deborah and Barak fought the forces of Sisera. And then over here is the hill of Moreh. And the hill of Moreh, well, that's where Jesus raised the widow of Nain's son. And on the other side, Elisha raised a young woman, an elderly woman's son to life. And then over here is Mount Gilboa. And that's where Gideon chose his 300 men. And every one of those are from this spot. You're able to see it. It's like the whole Old Testament just comes alive. We go from there to Megiddo. This is all still, by the way, day one. Then we go to Megiddo, which in Hebrew is Har Megiddo, the hill of Megiddo, but it comes over in the New Testament as Armageddon. We'll talk about why Armageddon is something mentioned in the book of Revelation and what that means, and what all happened at Megiddo. But while we're there, in addition to talking about those prophetic things, you'll get to see an altar, a high place that was in existence and being used when Abraham came into the land. That's how old it is. We'll also, as we're walking across the site, see the remains of a gate. That gate, I'll explain it when we get there, but that was built by Solomon. And it's mentioned in 1 Kings 9. So there's things in the Bible that you can even point to and say, that's exactly what the Bible was talking about. We get to the end of day one, and remember that walk I was talking about before up to Mount Arbel? There's the end of the walk, way up there until I see a couple people up there. And the reason we walk up there, and the reason we encourage everybody to get up there is because when you get on top, there's the Sea of Galilee. And it's a visual map of the Sea of Galilee. And you can literally walk your way around the Sea of Galilee and picture where every event is that Jesus did, because his ministry was on the northern end of the Sea of Galilee. Everything you see out there in front of you. My goal in the trip is I want to give you the big picture first so that when we get down on the detail, you don't get lost. So we see it from up on top. We end day one. The next day, we're down on there. We're going all the way around the Sea of Galilee. So that's when we get out on a boat. By the way, it's not a little fishing boat with 12 disciples tossed in a storm. Our goal is to be out there in the morning before the winds catch up. It's a real big boat, and it's a great time. But we'll have a worship time out on the Sea of Galilee. By the way, way in the back, just underneath the Israeli flag, that's Mount Arbel. That's where you were the night before. And now you get to see it down on the sea itself. We're going to go to the Mount of Beatitudes and talk about the Sermon on the Mount and what Jesus said there and the implications of the Mount of Beatitudes. It's an incredible spot, pretty spot, run by the Catholics. But she's still there. We don't know anymore now. 2 years. There's a real sweet nun who runs the site. And I go over and talk to her nicely. She lets us find a spot where we can get together with a group for a devotional time. We go to Capernaum, the town of Jesus, and you say, wait, that says Kafar Naum. That doesn't sound like my Bible. Well, actually, you'll find 4 different ways that Capernaum is spelled over there, because in Hebrew, it's really means village of Nahum, Kafar Nahum. And it translates into Greek, which translated into English, but I love it. In Hebrew, you can spell it any way you want. But we'll go to Capernaum. We'll see a synagogue there. This is after the time of Jesus, but the foundation of it it's sitting on was the one from the time of Christ. Some incredible things to see there. There's spend the whole day around the Sea of Galilee, and we end at a baptismal site. And if you've not been baptized but would like to by immersion, you can. If you think I have been, but I'd love to rededicate that, we let that do that too. Here's Alice being baptized by Pastor Bill. But if you notice carefully the hat that Pastor Bill is wearing that day, the Sun Devils. Next day, we go north. We go all the way up to Tel Dan. This trip is from Dan to Beersheba. In the Bible, that meant all of Israel from north to south. So we'll be up on Dan. And I can't put everything in here. We spend all afternoon. But one thing you'll learn is that your picture of Israel gets kind of blown away when you suddenly realize there's this beautiful water. It's like being in Colorado or like being in Pennsylvania in some of these areas when you see it. And you go, that's amazing. And then you read about the sin of the Danites who saw this and said, that's where God wants us to be. And he didn't. But if you'd have been there, you might have chosen the same thing. Sin can be very alluring. We go from there to Caesarea Philippi. That's where Jesus said, who do men say that I am? And I said to Peter, who do you say I am? Well, Caesarea Philippi is right at the base of Mount Hermon. That's Mount Hermon in the back, going up. And this water's coming right out of the base of the tent. So Jesus took his disciples there for some R&R. That's an incredible place. We go up on the Golan Heights, and we have to get a little bit away from it to see Mount Hermon. But that's Mount Hermon. In November, if there's been some rain in October or November, hopefully there'll be some snow on top of Mount Hermon. That's what we'd love to see. Now, after all of that, we come back to the hotel for the final night. The next day, we leave the Sea of Galilee. We end up going down south, heading toward the Dead Sea. But the first place we stop is in the Jezreel Valley, and it's where Gideon shows his 300 men. This is the En-Horod, the spring where he did that. And the neat thing is the spring still comes out of the mountain. You can't move the spring. So we know exactly where he chose his 300 men. And we can retell that story, and it will make a lot more sense when you're there. We leave from there, we head toward the Jordan River, and just before we get there, here's the city of Beit Shan. It was around, in fact, Saul's body was hung on the walls there in the Old Testament. But in the time of Jesus, it had become a Roman town. And in 749 AD, there was a massive earthquake that totally destroyed it. They're still digging it out. This is Israel's version of Pompeii. You get to see an incredible Roman city. And you also learn that I'm as quirky as they come. Like I see a city like that, go, so where did everybody go to the bathroom? And they found it. So you get to see the Roman toilets from Beit Shan. And then we head to my favorite place in all of Israel, the Judean wilderness. And if you're from Washington State, you think of wilderness like giant wooded mountains. If you're from Africa, you might think of the Sahara Desert. But you very seldom see anything like this. And yet there's so much of the Bible that has the wilderness in it, especially the Old Testament. And there's a spot here where a page from the Bible will come alive. We go past, we head down south now. We go to Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Do a relatively quick stop there, use their restrooms as well. And then we head to the southern end of the Dead Sea. This is where our hotel is. By the way, that's not a sunset shot, since the Dead Sea is to your east. That's a sunrise shot. Because we're going to spend 2 nights there. But the next day is going to be a half a day. And we do that because we've been running hard. We found through practice that you need time to just do a little bit of R&R. So the next day we do a half a day of touring, and then we have a half a day where we let people take a nap, do your laundry, write some postcards, fill up your notes, go to the spa, go floating in the Dead Sea. There's all sorts of things you can do, but you need some time off before we head to Jerusalem for the last part. But that's half a day. But the first half of the day, we're going to do something. We're going to go to En Gedi. If you look carefully on the picture, you might see a waterfall in the background. This is where David encountered Saul at the wilderness of En-Gedi, the spring of the wild goats. They see some people hiking in there, that hard hike up to the falls. That's not us. We're standing at the field school where I took this picture because it's a lot easier to get to the field school. And those people down there are making all sorts of noise. They're chasing all the animals out of En-Gedi. So we have about a 50-50 chance of running into the ibex, the wild goats, up where we are. And they're a lot more fun to see than these other sweaty tourists. And if it's really lucky, we'll see a coney, the rock badger, the hyrax, but I like the old King James version, the coney. The coney, yep, it's the Israeli version of the groundhog. It was an unclean animal, but it's good biblical lessons from it. That's the first stop. The second stop that morning is Masada. And in there's a white snake path you can see curving up. We don't take that. We take the cable car up because it's a lot easier to get to the top rather than hiking. And we spend the time up on top. It's really, it's just a fascinating place. You learn a lot about Herod the Great being up there and a little bit about David as well. And then your afternoon's free. And if you're saying, man, I want to go floating in the Dead Sea. That's what it looks like. You cannot sink in the Dead Sea. You can drown, but you can't sink. We'll explain that when we're there. And if they have them out, and if you're really adventuresome, they sometimes have mud where you can cover yourself with the Dead Sea mud, which people come from Europe to take the cure and do those kind of things. I think they're nuts, but that's okay. You can do that as well. Now we're going to go to Jerusalem. We go to Arad. You've never heard of it? 3 biblical connections, and we'll never forget it once we're there. And from there we go right, not too far away, to Beersheba. From Dan to Beersheba, from north to south, we went through the whole land of Israel. They're standing right by the well of Beersheba when I took this picture. We go to a place called Gufrin. No biblical significance, and yet it really is significant. And we'll go into these these man-made caves where they were mining the chalk inside. Talk about why. And you have to have your camera ready because you never know what you're going to see. In this case, we ran into a flock of sheep at the spot. They're buried in it. So you just have your camera there. This picture, and that's where I was going to use my thing. You're going to have to imagine in the middle of that picture, if you see, it looks like my face facing you, and you think, what in the world is he doing? I take people to this spot, and my goal is to convince you you're in the greatest spot you've ever been. And it takes a lot of talking, doesn't it? Plus or minus 100 yards, this group is standing where David fought Goliath, and I can prove it. And so that's what we do there. So we go off the beaten track every so often to show a spot that I think is truly significant. We go through all those places. We end up at Jerusalem, and we start the day in Jerusalem on the Mount of Olives because I want you to get the overview again. You want to see the city of Jerusalem, the iconic picture, the Dome of the Rock from the top of the Mount of Olives. That's where we then walk down the Mount of Olives. But it's also a good place, and we hope those photographers are still there so that we can get a group photo up there. Memento to take back with us. Halfway down, we stop at Dominus Flava, where Jesus traditionally wept over Jerusalem. We'll talk about the significance of the Mount of Olives in his first coming and in his second coming. And at the bottom of the Mount of Olives is the Garden of Gethsemane. And we focus on the events that took place when Jesus prayed. If possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. It's really an amazing place. And from that garden, you can actually look up and see the Eastern Gate, and then just behind it, poking up on the left side is the top of the Dome of the Rock. So all the pieces start fitting together, and you see how close they are. The afternoon of that day, we head to the other side of Jerusalem, to West Jerusalem. This is the Shrine of the Book. It's commemorating the Dead Sea Scrolls, and underneath that dome is this with a complete copy of the scroll of Isaiah inside. We talk about the significance of the Dead Sea Scrolls for the Bible and for the accuracy of the Bible. And while we're there, we can also go to see a model of Jerusalem. In the back right side top, again, if this were working, this would be great. There's a person standing to give you an idea of how big this is. This room that we're in is only a small part of everything you're seeing, but it's Jerusalem as it would have been in the time of Jesus. And by seeing it, before we get into the old city, you'll be able to put the pieces together mentally on how the city would fit together. And then we'll also be able to go inside the museum. Again, some of you could say, I'm going to find that nearest Israeli version of Starbucks because I would love to right now sit down and have a nice cup of coffee. And you can. But if you're still saying, I did not walk enough today, we need more walking, I'll take you inside the museum and show you things like, for example, the sarcophagus of Herod the Great, which has been uncovered. I mean, just some incredible finds, and they're in the Israel Museum. Speaking of Herod the Great, there are things outside Jerusalem while we're there. We're going to go to the one place Herod named after himself, the Herodium, an incredible spot where Herod built his fortress for himself, his palace for himself, where he wanted himself to be buried. And they fixed it up there. There's a little bit of a walk here up to Partway, and they found a private theater that Herod built for visitors from Rome. He built a private box inside, which they've now restored, and they have a movie that tells the life of Herod in a way that you'll never forget. And then when the Roman dignitaries left, he buried this and built his mausoleum right next to it, so that from Jerusalem people could look down and see where he was buried. Incredible. Then they walked to the top. Not everybody will walk to the top, but if you do, come up with me once we all catch our breath. I can tell you the story of Luke chapter 2 with the wise men, and standing on top, you can trace the entire story, because Jerusalem's visible, Bethlehem's visible, here it's visible, and where Mary and Joseph fled is visible. Everything's together in that one spot. Of course, we'll do all sorts of things in Jerusalem, one of which is going on Via Dolorosa. I showed you those steps earlier, but we walk and we go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But we want to end our time with a communion service and a visit to the Garden Tomb, because that brings everything together, because we realize we've seen sights, but it's not the sights that are significant. It's what the sights are pointing to that's really significant. And we don't worship a tomb. We worship the Son of God who just temporarily inhabited it before he rose from the dead. Now, this is not a shopping tour, but there is time we'll give you for shopping. I reluctantly give that time, but we'll turn you loose at one spot in the old city. It's a dead-end street, one end to the other end, and you can look at the shops. We'll test your bargaining skills. We'll teach you the shopping proverb from the book of Proverbs before we turn you loose.
5 minutes, right?
It's 30. 30, and that's 25 more than I would prefer, but that's another whole story. You have your camera ready, because there's incredible pictures that you'll be able to see, just vistas and views. Expect new adventures. If you want to ride a camel, that's a possibility. Not one I recommend necessarily, but we've had people want to ride camels. If you want to try St. Peter's fish, you'll have that opportunity. I'm not a fish lover. I tend to go with St. Peter's pizza. Or St. Peter's, the cock that crowed, St. Peter's chicken. Now, people are saying, but that comes back to, so what do I eat? I mean, I'm a picky eater. I'm a picky eater, and I've never had a problem there. The meals, breakfast and dinner, are buffets. Multiple meat options, vegetables, fruits. You will not lose weight on the trip. You have an opportunity to try all sorts of things. One of the fun things is you get to meet some new people, both from Grace, and we have some people from around the country. And you'll come with some friends, but I hope you leave with a lot more and get to know them and know their experience. There's nothing like it in Israel. You may even get a chance, if we have the time, if we've done well, to see what it would be like to try out a 2,600-year-old tomb in Jerusalem. We asked for volunteers, but if you've ever wanted to know what a family tomb would have been like, we can show you. I expect to take a lot of pictures. Again, a lot of these were spring, but flowers, even in November, you'll find flowers. You'll find just incredible things that take. A Rolling Stone tomb. Have a chance to see a Rolling Stone tomb, to visualize that. Don't forget your cords. There are plugs in the bus to charge your stuff. Again, plugs into hotels at night, but make sure you bring what you need to charge your camera or phone or whatever else you have. Expect the unexpected. I mean, how many camel crossing signs have you ever seen here in the States? I showed you earlier, but seeing an Orthodox Jew riding a Segway in the old city, that I've only seen it once, but I was ready. Most of all, you just expect to have a great time. You come away knowing the Bible, more in love with God, meeting some new friends, and hopefully have trips that a month or two later are going to change your life. Now, have you gone through it all? I've tried to answer a bunch of questions, but I'm sure I didn't answer them all. So what questions do you have? Yes?
I didn't hear you mention Jericho. Is that on the list?
Yes. Here's why I say that. Jericho is one of the safe areas. I'm always under promise, over deliver, so I never promise Jericho. But if I have a chance, we will be in Jericho because there's a fellow there named Waleed who calls me Father Charlie. And Waleed is incredible. We've watched his little kids grow up. It's just a fun place. You can meet the Arab Einstein who's there. But too much of a but yes, ever possible we try to go. Munir, the driver, is friends with all these people, and so we are probably the only American bus usually that's there. All the Europeans go. Most Americans do not because most of them have Israeli guides and Israeli drivers, Jewish drivers, and they just try and avoid those areas. Munir, because he's Arab, can go in, and Tali gets permission to go, or sometimes we've had to drop her off, go in and come back out. But Munir will know, and if it's safe to go, we go to Jericho. Because I'm missing my kanafe, which is an Arab dessert that I love. Okay, yes.
How much about is the insurance that they say to recommend?
It varies depending on age and the company. But it can run. I'm thinking it was like $600-700 to $1,100 depending on someone's age. But it's one of those things where I would try multiple companies if you get serious about it, and find one. You want one that covers basically three things. You want lost luggage. If your luggage ever gets lost, you want them to say, here's money, go buy clothes. Because what you have on after 2 or 3 days, like Lazarus, be holy stinking. But lost luggage, you want one that has the medical. That's usually the most expensive component. And the third component is normally, and I got something what it is. What I miss? Trip cancellation. That's it. Thank you. Yeah. So that if there's if the trip gets canceled, they pay back, or if you have to cancel, cancel for any reason. There are times when you can cancel, get your funds back. So you look for those three, and I'd say shop around to find the one that meets best. But your insurance agent and Morningstar Tours can give you the name of the company that they use. No, well, if for Morningstar Tours, if you apply for the tour, I mean, you put in your first deposit, they will send you that information, and usually there's a if you get it early, then there's cancellation for any reason. If you wait, then you can wait, but you may lose that from the company that they use. But you can find somebody else that might have the same thing. Again, we've used a different company, only because we've used the companies for all sorts of travel, and it's just worked fine for us. But the one Morningstar Tours has is also a fine company, and so are others. But anyway, they would send you something when you submit a deposit. Otherwise, I'd be looking anyway, just to talk to your insurance agent or someone to say, what do you have and what will it cover? Yes.
That you're Medicare and you are not. One will cover you internationally.
It will not.
So.
That's right.
Only one that will not be covered. Otherwise, it will not cover you out.
Yeah, that's our Social Security is for U.S. only, and that's why it's important to have that medical coverage for yourself. Yes.
What about the
Your insurance
internet there? There's not a problem with the internet?
There is sometimes a problem. It's less of a problem than it was. There's internet on the bus. However, that's assuming that there's a cell tower as we're going up and down those hills. So it's spotty on the bus. The hotels have all got internet now. If they're totally crowded and whatnot, when all the people come in at night, it can get rather slow. I've known because I've had to do my radio program there and try and upload the program, which is really interesting. But it's become far better. Israel, as on a whole, is better than the U.S. in terms of internet coverage outside. Cell phone coverage, I've not had a problem. Now, I should say that. Check with your provider because it varies. I have T-Mobile now. T-Mobile covers me in Israel, and I get Wi-Fi without trouble, I get text without trouble, and it's like 5 cents a minute for phone calls. I had AT&T at one point and forgot to turn off data roaming. And after about 3 or 4 days, I turned that off, and I had a bill for $300. But most companies now have an international data roaming or data plan, but it varies from company to company. So T-Mobile works great for me, though I have terrible coverage here. But AT&T is good. Verizon, a lot of people have Verizon, and they've had an international plan, and it's like $10 a day or something to pay.
Yeah, that's what you have to do with your cell phone, it's gonna be international.
Plan. Yeah, and each company will have one.
Phone won't necessarily work.
Or it will work at a very expensive rate. Yes.
On the Mother's Day, should women bring scarves?
Well, you say no. Yeah, for heads, heads didn't need to be covered. So it's just shoulders and knees. But if your shoulders are uncovered, we've had women put a scarf around their shoulders, and that'll work. Again, legalism is a wonderful thing in these countries. It doesn't matter what you use as long as you've covered it. Yes.
I was wondering, like, if my cousin is in Illinois, do you have to be a church member or can you invite people that are not?
You can invite people that are not. In fact, thank you, because you remind me of something else. We have 21 people signed up right now. We're gonna get 48 to 50 is gonna be our maximum. We have a few people who aren't members of this church, but who knew about it and signed up. They can come, and what Morningstar Tours will do is they'll give them an option. They can come here and join the group, or they can say, I'm in Illinois, we're flying out of New York. We'll get you a flight from Illinois to New York, and you'll join the group in New York and fly internationally from there. So that is possible. And again, I gotta say threat because I hate high pressure salesmen. We don't know how long this is going to take till it fills up. It could be June, July till it's filled. It could fill up in 2 weeks. I don't know. And my answer is, if God wants you on the trip, He'll work that out for you. But it is not quite half filled, but it's getting there. And when it's filled up, then they'll just put you on a waiting list, because there are some people in the end who drop out. And so even if you're on a waiting list, that doesn't mean you won't be able to go. But if you want to be sure to go, you can keep checking. Can I give you a phone number? Is it on there for Morningstar? It is? 972-690-0092? Okay, no, okay. It's just write the number down, 972, which is down. Yeah, 690-0092. That's the Morningstar Tours, the tour operator in Dallas. If you call them, you can ask for anybody, but the person who handles our tours is named Abby Spencer. And you can talk to Abby, or if she's not in, somebody can answer or give her the message and she'll get back to you. But she can answer all sorts of questions. They handle the logistics, and they've done that. I've worked with them for about 27 years since they started, and they've done a terrific job in terms of handling all the details. Yes. Yeah, if you go to the online site, you can sign up online, but you can also contact them by phone. If somebody doesn't have the internet access, you can call them and they can help you do that as well.
How long is the one?
Oh, no, go ahead.
How long is the one?
It is from the time I leave my house to the time I get to Israel, to the airport or to the hotel. It's about 24 hours. That's how I plan it. But the flight itself is about 5 hours from here to an Eastern Gateway, and then it's 10 to 11 to 12, depending on winds, from there till it lands in Tel Aviv. Israel is, in November they'd be back. Israel will be 9 hours ahead of the U.S. because daylight saving would be off at that time. Right now they're 10 hours ahead of the U.S. Yeah, so you need to have friends. Make sure you let them know when they can call you if you want them to call you, because 2 a.m. is not when you want to get a nice phone call.
And what people there to do that kind of.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes. Brief story. if you're planning on baptism, you can wear short pants, you can wear a bathing suit. Short pants and a t-shirt. You need to have something to wear under. The Christian baptismal sites run by a Jewish kibbutz, only in Israel. They provide towels, they provide a baptismal robe and a changing area. What they don't tell you necessarily is that the baptismal robes are made out of very thin cotton that becomes absolutely translucent when it hits the water. And the reason we know that, and if you ever saw my one book, I told the story, but we had a lady who was baptized, she forgot to bring her stuff and said, no matter. And she was wearing purple underwear that day. It got worse because the fellow who's baptizing her was a little older, and her legs popped up and the water started coming. She started floating down the Jordan River and he's trying to hold on to her and he can't. And Greg Hatterberg was there at the time. Greg's wading out in the water trying to get her. So it was definitely drawing attention. So all that to say, we will remind everybody that night that you want to wear shorts, bathing suit, and anything like that is fine. Otherwise, you could become a chapter in another book at some point in the future. Okay, now it's 4 minutes after 3. I'm always one of those that stickler for time because when I taught, when the bell rang, everybody got up and left. You better be done. So I think let me close in prayer, and if you have any other questions, feel free to come on up and I'll be happy to answer them. But otherwise, I want to be respectful of your time and let you go. So let's pray. Father, we do thank you for this time together. I love any time I can talk about Israel, so thank you for the opportunity. Lord, you know in this group who will ultimately want to go, who won't, but even those who don't want to go, I pray that this was an encouraging time to them to learn more about the land. We do pray, Lord, that you would just give clear direction to each person. Help them to just have a sense of calmness and trust, knowing whatever way it's going, that's what your leading will be. We ask that you give everybody safety as they leave today here, give them safety going home. And we promise to give you all the praise as we watch you put this together, because we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh, by the way, one last thing I want to mention now as you're going, safety remind me of it. Not safe. Is it safe to go to Israel? The most dangerous part of a trip to Israel is from your house to Sky Harbor. Statistically, there's more danger of something happening driving on the highways here in Phoenix than it is once you get on that plane. But it's all in God's hands. Thanks. Have a great day.
Couldn't have it.